We're recording, and let's go to live on Facebook. Labor against cops.
Cool. I guess I'll introduce myself and then we'll popcorn to everybody and go through everybody's names and affiliations and stuff then.
Yes, just let's wait until I can say for sure that the stream is working. Okay. Choose how you wanted to. Okay, next. Done. Is it? Can't tell if it's live here. Go live. Okay, I think I just have to press this go live. Sorry, I should add a title. What's the Reimagining Solidarity toward cop-free unions and communities. Go live. All right, it's just giving me a little bit of a progress bar here. Seems to be going pretty quickly. Hopefully we'll be on Facebook momentarily. And we can cut out that little intro in post. All right, Coral, it looks like it's working. Take us away.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Coral Pope. I'm going to be facilitating the forum today. I use she, her pronouns. I'm on stolen Kalapuya land in Oregon. I'm from SEIU Local 503. And I'm excited to bring, that there's a space for all of these awesome organizers and union activists to share their information together. So I'm going to popcorn to Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna Hackman. I am an educator, rank and file member of AFT 1789, and a member of Labor for Black Lives. We're talking about some of our work with spelling SPOG from the Labor Council and some of the work we've been doing since then. So thank you for having me today. Am I picking the next person? So Julia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Walace. I use she, her pronouns. I am currently in Inglewood. I'm a member of SEIU Local 721, LA County worker. And I am also part of SEIU Drop the Cops. We are rank and file and staff, but majority rank and file members of SEIU locals around the country. And we are fighting to disaffiliate the police from our unions. For folks who may not know, a person like Rayshard Brooks, who was murdered in Atlanta, the cop who murdered him is a member of SEIU. That's totally unacceptable. And we're fighting to get rid of murderous cops like that one from our union and to organize the unorganized. And I will popcorn to Asmara. I'm sorry, I forgot. I forgot also I'm a writer for LeftVoice.org. And we write about stuff like that, and we have several articles about the fights to disaffiliate from the police. But yes, I'd like to popcorn to Asmara, please.
Thank you, Julia.
Some feedback.
You might be, I think I'm seeing two screens of yours.
To Asmara, right. Are you on two devices, Asmara?
No, but I tried.
Oh, one thing you can just do is turn your volume all the way down while you're talking. It's not a perfect solution, but it does at least solve that issue.
How does that work? Oh, okay.
Perfect.
I can't hear you guys, but we'll go from here. Thank you, Julia, for that introduction. Might pass. My name is Asmara Gebre, and I'm a midwife in San Francisco. I work at San Francisco General Hospital usually, and on July 8th, I was leaving work and I noticed 6 sheriff deputies following a Black person and harassing the individual to leave the premise. The person repeatedly kept asking for their EBT card and their phone charger, and obviously was displaying signs of mental health instability. And the officers continued to tell the person to leave very aggressively, also disclose their COVID positive status publicly, and were informing me that I needed to leave. Eventually were laughing at me and walked away from me and another person who both identify as Black, leaving us with the person that they required 6 officers to leave, and told me, it seems like you know it all. You should be able to handle this, and walked away. To this date, I don't know the name of the officers, but that day I wrote a public letter to our hospital administration in our city that I was on a sick strike because I'm sick of their racism and targeting of Black people. In the last year, there's been over 100 cases of force by the sheriffs, and 70% of them have been towards Black people. Our emergency department has on high ends a traffic volume of Black people that is 24%. So as you can note, that is a disproportionate amount of harm happening to our Black community. And additionally, through my years of experience at the General, I've witnessed other forms of harm from sheriffs, including headlocking Black individual who was asking to be released and saying they couldn't breathe, to creating a physical barrier from them entering a person's room who was in labor on a false call from a nurse reporting harm or fear of safety, when many people, all people of color present, denied that occurring. So that's just kind of a really overall summary of just some of the pieces of my current status on demanding that the sheriffs be removed from the hospital setting. Less than 1% of hospitals in the nation use police as primary security, and why is it that our only sanctuary hospital in San Francisco utilizes such a force that causes harm? So thank you for inviting me to this space, and I look forward to the conversation this evening.
Popcorn to Halimat.
Hello, my name's Halima, Alawode. I use she, her pronouns. I'm glad to be joining you today. Sorry, I was a little bit late. I wasn't given the correct link, so I apologize about that. I'm here from No Cop Unions. We are currently looking to get police representation out of AFL-CIO. We have a petition out right now. We're particularly targeting AFL-CIO because they house one of the largest cop unions in the nation. And they're probably one of the largest unions in the nation as well, and probably one of the hardest to get to budge right now on the issue as well. I'm so happy to be on this panel. I follow a lot of you on Twitter and social media already, and I'm so excited to hear about all the work everyone's doing. No Cop Union is primarily focused on trying to be a hub for a lot of the locals and other chapters in different unions. We have Teamsters members, we have SEIU members, we have CWA members. I'm a CWA Baltimore Washington News Guild member. Even though I'm currently unemployed, unemployment does not mean you're not still a worker. And so we really want to be a resource. We're not looking to spearhead our own, because so many locals are doing the work already of trying to disaffiliate on their level, trying to disaffiliate, have movements and petitions move up the ladder. And so we're really here to support that, and how to connect other people to what's going on. We've seen so much coming out of the West Coast right now, because a lot of our members are on the West Coast, and we've seen a lot of labor council movements and just strategizing on that. And so I'm really excited to talk about all that with y'all today. Thank you. I will popcorn to Bo.
Hi, I apologize. I just signed on like the tail end of your talk there. What am I supposed to do? We're just doing intros?
Yeah, if you want to, say your affiliation, your pronouns, if you know what Indigenous land you're on, that's a great one to throw in there. And yeah, a little bit about why you want to talk, why we're all talking together, I guess. And then we're gonna move on to a quick summary that we came up with about the intention of this forum. And then we'll have some more time for speakers after that too.
Okay, thank you. My name is Bo. My pronouns are he and him. I am a custodian at University of Washington and shop steward for Local 1488, a member of AFSCME. I do a number of labor union things. I'm a delegate to both the county and the state labor councils. I'm an officer on my local and state e-board. I'm on bargaining team, and I'm also in Seattle DSA, and I do external organizing in DSA. Currently living on Coast Salish territory, which includes many peoples, Muckleshoot, Duwamish, so many communities that I don't even know them all, but I was primarily raised on Dene land, Dene and Hopi land in northern Arizona. So a lot of my indigenous community roots actually are from the Southwest. And yeah, I'm here to just talk about why cops are not part of our movement and don't deserve a place in our movement whatsoever.
Awesome. I'm really excited to hear from all of you a little bit more. I wanted to read something that we had a couple people prepared, just sort of why we wanted to bring all of you together and talk about how cops don't belong in our unions. And so creating cross-union solidarity with others working towards a common goal of dismantling white supremacy and creating healthy communities is going to take our efforts is going to make our efforts more effective, because we can all learn and help each other. By learning about the tactics and struggles in our separate groups, we can better prepare our unions and communities to confront these problems. Organized labor must join the fight for Black lives and against police and policing in all its forms, including the carceral system, psychiatric detention, child protective services, and pathologizing forces of social control, including social work. But this can't be done until we clean house. Together, we can become a decisive force for victory, but apart, we ensure our continued failure or defeat. So I'm really excited to learn about what all of these different groups are doing, and I'm sure a lot of other people feel the same way, because there's a never-ending urgency to this issue. And with that, I'm going to popcorn to Asmara, if you want to talk a little bit more about what sort of tactics or what you're organizing around right now.
Yeah, thank you. I think first and foremost, it was a matter of health for myself. I think I'm not sure of the common awareness, but institutionalized spaces all around, including our hospital systems, are embedded within white supremacy, and day to day with just trying to navigate the work around caring for and ensuring the safety of pregnant people, in particular Black and brown bodies. It's a hard one. And that is important work that must continue on many levels. And through my work as a midwife, I was doing that by advocating for communities in several ways. And that in itself is a lot of work, and is hard. To then add the policing system to that. So nationally speaking, Black women, or in California, Black women die 3 to 4 times the rate of a white woman within the year of giving birth. And then in New York, that's 12 times. And we've looked at all the different aspects of why that can happen. And a lot points at the treatment and care and the lack of access to care in a timely fashion, which accounts for 60% of those cases. And so we know that racism it attributes to that. And so when we have that occurring, and then the harm that policing causes to Black families on different spectrums, whether a person be sleeping or walking with some Skittles or trying to have a baby. We have active genocide of Black humans in the United States currently. And so that's a lot of stress to carry as an individual. And personally, I have a traumatizing history with law enforcement from a very young age. And so to continuously walk into spaces where I'm already challenged to carry out the work that's essential that I do carry out as the only Black identifying healthcare provider at the General that is a midwife, and provides prenatal care predominantly to Black families. It feels like a battle that's too large for one individual or a few individuals to take on. And so for me personally, when I experienced that situation, I was no longer working. I was a community member walking out of work. And all of that happened. And if I'm a healthcare provider in a privileged position to, and still felt unsafe, I just think about all my patients or the other people accessing healthcare that are in different positions, how unsafe it can be for them. For example, those who are undocumented. I've had several patients who report that their family members didn't come in because there was law enforcement at the door. And nationally speaking, lawyers have brought this case up around fear of accessing healthcare or not accessing healthcare at all because of law enforcement within hospital institutions. So all of that put together, basically for me, my action was a 6 strike. So I am not going into work every time I have a shift. And that is a self-care act that I needed to take. Additionally, I've been joining other community members in actions. For example, a lot of the police brutality going on here in San Francisco demands that we do come together. And so I've been working with community organizers in supporting those efforts and joining community public spaces to give voice to counteract the policing harm. Additionally, in the hospital setting, there's the DPH Must Divest Coalition, which is a group of healthcare providers and community members and experts that have looked at the current policy and alternatives to sheriffs, and are also calling for removal of the sheriffs. And they've hosted some forums, including one coming up on the 9th, to get community input, get healthcare provider input, and seek out viable options that don't include police in our hospital system. I hope that answers your question. And I'll pass it to Bo.
Hello. Just so I'm getting my bearings correctly. We're going to do a popcorn format for the rest of this this panel discussion. Is that correct? I'm sorry, I missed
Yeah.
like the first 10-15 minutes of this whole shebang, so I'm like trying to get caught up.
Yeah, we have about an hour total of speaking time, and we started a little late, so we're gonna speak until about a little after 6 o'clock, and then we'll have a 30-minute Q&A sort of discussion where people are gonna be sending questions in,
Sure.
which allows about roughly 8 minutes per speaker for that time.
Sorry, I'm multitasking, but I actually have people that are messaging me trying to get on because the original link is not what people can get on anymore. So how can people watch this?
Yeah, thanks for that question.
In fact, can someone email me the link, and can someone else go besides me so I can redistribute that link to other people so they can watch this?
Yeah. So there was a bit of a technical glitch here, and we had to change the link at the last second, which is why there's been some people coming on, and we were a little late getting started. So I will just send you that link, Bo, and actually I'll just
I apologize for slowing the process down.
No, it's good. It's because we're not streaming actually from the Drop the Cops Facebook page. We're streaming from the Labor Against Cops Facebook page. I guess now I can interject with this, that we are Labor Against Cops. We're just kind of trying to build this disaffiliation movement, bring in everybody from from the unions and from the abolitionists and all across the board. And meanwhile, I can here's the link.
But can in the meantime, can I popcorn to someone else? Anyone?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, go for it.
Can I be popcorned? Sorry.
Yes, Halimat.
Halima, sorry.
Halimat.
I
Sorry.
gently and politely remind you every time. And so I actually want to also request that we don't do popcorning, and for that specific reason, I've noticed that because I have a very foreign first and last name, whenever we do popcorn scenarios, I end up being the last person to always get popcorned. And I feel like people who also have names like that may notice that people end up being afraid to say your name, and that fear, you end up never being mentioned. And so I would love to avoid that here tonight. And so I think that there's a really cool raise your hand feature that would be great if any of us have something to say that I think would be able to utilize. I raised my hand for this portion. And so I wanted to kind of piggyback off Asmara, and anyone, if I mispronounce your name, please persistently correct me. I wanted to piggyback off of that as well, because I think we see a lot of fear about being honest when we say that we don't believe police officers are laborers in our society, that we don't believe that they deserve the protections of labor in our society, and because specifically they're violence workers in our society. I encourage all of those who, even if you do not have an abolitionist framework yet in your worldview, I still think that you are able to have questions about where police what role they play, and if they do play the role of labor, and if that role deserves labor protections. And I also, for those who may be questioning, I'm always happy to give resources. There are people who are far more educated than me who have been asking this question of the world and those around them. And there are people like Professor Vitali, I believe, and other professors I would be happy to link people to as well, or on Twitter, if you follow me on Twitter, who discuss these type of issues about how police officers don't do what they say they do. They're not reduced. I know people, the big thing is like, what about the rapists and the killers? And I promise you the same amount of untested rape kits will still be untested, whether or not police officers have labor representation. That's one of the first things that we throw at us. The crimes that they already weren't solving are suddenly going to continue to be not solved if they no longer have labor representation. I wanted to ask, when we as laborers demand things, where are our police union brothers usually on that when that happens? Are they on the other side of the picket line, clubbing us, telling us that we can't, telling us no? Are they getting their collective bargaining rights somehow magically protected while everyone else's has theirs decimated? Wisconsin State specifically, when the teachers unions had their collective bargaining gutted, when every other public service worker had their collective bargaining rights gutted, police unions and fire unions were the only ones in the state who were able to not. And thankfully to our fire union brothers, they came out against that, saying, no, we think that our other brothers and sisters deserve protections. And police unions said, we actually don't care because we're fine and we know that our collective bargaining rights will always be protected because our collective bargaining rights are completely tied to our ability to kill with impunity. Police officers know that, they utilize it. It's always first and foremost in their negotiations. We're trying to keep some healthcare, trying to make sure our bosses are not completely exploiting us. And a lot of our co-union brothers and sisters, as you saw, as you stated earlier, Julia, the officer down in Atlanta was an SEIU brother, and he is able to kill a Black man on the street and then use collective bargaining and the tools that we have fought so hard for to say, well, I actually should be able to do this with impunity. I actually shouldn't be able to be held accountable in a court of law for this. And in fact, I think my union should pay for my representation. And I don't think that that's what labor is for. I don't think any of us have been able to collectively bargain our ability to kill people. I don't think any of us have been able to bargain our ability to throw every other union under the bus. I mean, even within our own unions, think about the police unions who may be within our unions. How many of them have ever been willing to put money towards organizing? How many of them have actually put their fight behind the fight for 15? How many of them have actually put their weight behind some of the things that we need as workers to get better wages, better livelihoods? Your police union brothers and sisters have never been on that front line with you. They have gladly been on the other line getting overpay with our collective bargaining rights to beat the crap out of us when we were trying to ask for more. And so I want us to fundamentally understand they are not workers. Police officers, violence workers are not workers. They are protectors of capital. What they protect is the capital in the city. They protect the buildings in place. They protect them from us if we are standing there for too long, if we're too shifty in an area. They protect them. They protect things and wealth. They are not workers with us. And so I want us to really fundamentally understand that when we are saying we don't want them in our unions, we're not attacking ourselves. We are building ourselves up. We see what's happening with coronavirus, where our economy is going. Labor, we're going to be up for a fight. We are going to be up for the fight of our lives. And I promise you, instead of trying to cannibalize ourselves to keep police officers in our union, we should really rally up our base, which are our Black and brown workers, which are our people who are on the other end of those bats, and rally behind our actual people who are going to be in us for the fight, and not police officers. I do not think we should sacrifice the future of labor for police officers who will not be sacrificing anything for us in the upcoming years as we fight to stay above water with the ramifications of COVID-19. And so that's one of the main things I'm going to be pushing hard in the next hour, that police officers are not workers and they are not part of us. They do not deserve labor protections, and they do not fundamentally operate in society the way that we do, and they do not get our protections. They do not, no, not from me, not from not from you. And so I'm gonna pass it on to anyone else who wants to speak. I'm gonna popcorn Julia. I think you might want to have something to say. I don't know who wants to speak.
Thank you, Halima. That was fire. I love it. I love that. And I also want to thank the bravery of Asmara for standing to the police to their face and telling them they need to go. And like refusing to work and going on your own strike. We need to have strikes against the police and strikes against police terror. I feel like that should be a project that isn't just a slogan, and I'm going to talk about people who talked about slogans in a moment, but that's not just a slogan, but something that we should be a goal, that when the police attack us or murder us, we are prepared to not work as organized labor. With that, we're saying no, this is where, because it's good for us to go protest after work. I'm for those things. but we should be withholding our labor because that's what makes us powerful as workers. We should be organizing people who aren't working. And that's also part of SEIU Drop the Cops. Part of one of our demands, and folks can look up SEIU Drop the Cops for some of our demands. But our demands are that we want to organize workers. So we don't just want to kick out the police, because we were told by some folks, oh my gosh, if you kick out the police, that's going to upset our dues base. I don't want their money, okay? And I don't want to just have less workers. I want us to disaffiliate the police, and I want us to organize more workers. More workers so that more people are represented. To build our labor movement means we have to kick out the police. They have to go, because it's not okay for us to be like, we're for Black Lives Matter. You know, our president, Mary Kay Henry, saying she's for Black lives and things like that. But then we still have these people, they gotta go. We should not be representing them. That cop who murdered Rayshard Brooks needs to go. And so I wanted to talk a little bit also about us organizing in the time of a Democratic Party administration. So our unions, many of them gave millions and millions of dollars to the Biden campaign, okay? Now, what's gonna happen? What do we think is gonna happen? Both the Democrats and Republicans passed historic bailouts to the wealthiest corporations and people in the world. Who do they think is going to pay for those bailouts? It's going to be public sector workers. That's who they're going to target for that. They're going to say, we don't have any money, budget cuts, COVID. No, we need to also say that that's not okay. The rich need to pay for this crisis. They're the ones who kept us from being able to be safe from COVID. They're the ones that are keeping people unsafe by continuing to work. They're the ones who are getting all this money while folks are still hemming and hawing about the next stimulus check. Everybody needs that stimulus check, except for the billionaires and the millionaires. They don't need any more money. We need that money. And actually, and frankly, it's our money. You know, because the wealthiest people, they only pay $750. Billionaires only pay $750. I know a lot of people who pay more than that. Okay, so and the reason why they got wealthy was from the backs of the working class. So we have to prepare, as Halimat said, we need to prepare for the fight of our lives. And that means kicking the police out who shouldn't have access to us and our defenses. I mean, the police, they murder people, many of them individually. They have high rates of domestic violence. So there's no wonder that rape kits aren't getting tested. Many of them are rapists and abusers themselves. So our fight about kicking out the cops, and I'm so glad that so many other unions are here so that we can get together to talk about what we need to do. And really strategize, because in these discussions that we have with our coworkers, many of them say the similar things. What about the rapists and the murderers? Well, a lot of healthcare workers and social workers deal with people who are violent and are able to de-escalate. It seems as though when the police show up, they escalate situations. A high percentage of people who are killed are people who have mental disabilities. So they're not really playing that role. And recently, what we heard from former President Barack Obama was that defund the police. We need to step back from that slogan. But to be head of the largest imperialist war machine in the history of the world means that actually, in fact, you are a police yourself. And so, of course, those are the things that he's saying. I think for us, as regular working class people who are in the throes, many of us, myself included, I'm an essential worker, I'm still working, I'm still having to deal with the dangers of not having PPE, increased caseloads, decrease in shelter and homeless services as cases increase. That's what I'm seeing. We need to really figure out how we can not only fight the police, but also fight for our jobs as workers, to put pressure and to mobilize ourselves so that we are protected in every sense of the word, and that we help our coworkers to feel empowered to take on these police. And not just here in the United States. These questions about are the police workers are happening around the world. These debates that are happening, some places where police aren't members of unions, some folks are like, well, they should be, they should have rights. For what? I mean, we already have that experience here. The police defend the worst police, the most violent, sadistic ones, and the ones that aren't necessarily doing the dirt are protecting the ones that are. So in other countries, there's no, we should also be supporting those efforts for people to say, no, police aren't workers, or they're violence workers. Their job is to oppress, to evict. Sheriffs evict people. When we go on strike, the police beat us up. And as the pandemic continues, they're going to be doing more of that. So we need to also be supporting the efforts internationally. In India, as folks may know, there was a recent general strike. Hundreds of millions of workers went on strike. They did, and they're going to do it again pretty soon. And so we have to highlight internationally these workers' efforts. You think one cop marched on the picket line with them? Let me tell you, the answer is no. So they didn't do that. They don't do that. They don't do that in India. They don't do that in Argentina. They don't do that in Brazil. They don't do that in the Philippines. They don't do that in Nigeria. They don't do that in the United States. All over the world, the police's social position is to oppress us and to target the working class, to increase bigotry against trans people, non-binary queer people, people of color, women, immigrants, and the working class as a whole, and people with disabilities. So I just wanted to make sure to make some of those points also, so we also see ourselves as a global movement. But I'm also looking forward to talking about more of how we can work together here as people who, many workers, are members of our unions, and workers listen to us and talk with us, and how we can increase our fight in the labor movement, and really build a fight to literally be able to strike against police terror. When they target us, we withhold our work until they're gone and arrested. Thank you. And who would like to go next? I will leave it up. Anna, Bo, who?
I don't mind
Anna.
going next.
Anna.
All right,
Okay.
Anna, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you everyone for these. This is awesome. I'm so thankful to be sharing this space with all of you. Yeah, I was asked to come and talk about some of the organizing work I did around expelling SPOG, the Seattle Police Officers Guild, from the Martin Luther King County Labor Council in Seattle. That the issue of SPOG being admitted into the council wasn't really a new issue. It had been going on for several years, really kind of, and as you all kind of put so eloquently, the issue of police representation in labor as a whole had been an issue for several years, right? And we understood a lot about that. We understood that there's a difference between being a person who earns a wage and being working class, and that cops, they may earn a wage, but they're not working class. Right, their role is to brutalize, to police, to kill working class communities, particular BIPOC working class communities, and to protect the power and property of the wealthy. We understood that, and we also understood working class is more than just like your relationship to the means of production or your wages or your benefits, but that it was a set of politics. It was understanding that our exploitation in our workplaces is connected to the exploitation and oppressions of others outside of our workplaces. And so that it wasn't enough to focus on things like our wages and our benefits, that we needed to be in solidarity with each other in the fights for affordable housing, in the fights against police brutality, in the fights for climate change, fights against climate change, right? We needed to be in solidarity with all of those struggles. Cops aren't able to be in solidarity with us. Like, that is antithetical to their role in a capitalist state. It's actually impossible for them to be in solidarity with us. And so we knew that it was important then to not just expel SPOG from the Labor Council, but that this needed to be the beginning of building a labor movement that was truly anti-racist and feminist and anti-capitalist, and that it was going to have to be led by the rank and file. Unfortunately, our labor has a history of being on the wrong side of history with anti-racist movements. And so we knew that we were going to have to come together quickly, and we were going to have to make a real organized push. And again, this wasn't new. We had been talking, this had been, since SPOG was admitted, we'd been having these debates about, police in labor. But what was different this time was really the movement for Black lives, and the doors that they were able to open for us. Even more specifically, the work of like Decriminalize Seattle, speaking of Seattle specifically, the King County Equity Now Coalition, and of course the establishment of CHOP, the Capitol Hill Occupied Protest Zone, that emerged from that. And CHOP was a literal reimagining of a world without police, right? It was like holding it up in front of us and being like, look, like this is possible. And it created this space where we were able to come together. And it was actually at CHOP that I ran into a friend and comrade, Whitney Kahn, who's a member of Seattle Education Association. And we start talking about just kind of the bureaucracy of the Labor Council. We were kind of trying to think through like identifying delegates and how to kind of, get through this vote. And we're realizing, God, this is our Labor Council, first of all, our Labor Council, not our e-board's Labor Council. This is our Labor Council. And it's so inaccessible to us, and it's so convoluted, and it feels so undemocratic, and kind of like doing what bureaucracies do, right? Like just kind of swallowing us whole. And like that was bullshit, right? It was slowing us down. And we decided that, okay, you know what? Instead of us trying to find a way into the Labor Council, we're going to bring them out to us, and we're going to bring them out to this movement. So if they do vote on the wrong side of history, they got to do it in front of their workers. They got to do it in front of the movement. Right. And so we were just like, okay, you know what? We're going to do this, and we're going to do it at CHOP. We're going to, this CHOP, the movement is what is making this vote even possible. So we've got to be in real solidarity with them. So we called for a meeting at Cal Anderson Park, which was like at the heart of the Capitol Hill Occupied Protest Zone. Put a call out on the signal thread that Bo had actually set up. We met the Sunday before the vote. The vote was on a Wednesday. We all gathered on the Sunday before. We decided we're going to hold a rally. We're going to bring union workers from across industries and trades together. We're going to speak on why we need to expel SPOG. We've kind of followed that with an open mic so that members of like the CHOP community and any other community members can kind of come in and speak on that issue as well, or anything else kind of related to it. And so with really like less than 72 hours, like we just kind of had to move, like securing everything that we needed to do. And that night of the vote, we were able to gather over 600 people in CHOP to speak out against SPOG in the Labor Council. We had this like amazing lineup of speakers. And in the end, in a large part, I think because of this push from rank and file workers, right, like coming together across unions, the council voted 55% to 45% roughly to expel the Seattle Police Officers Guild from the Labor Council. It was a historic victory. Yeah, it's awesome. And we knew we couldn't lose that momentum. So what many of us did is we continued coming together to form the Labor for Black Lives Collective. We knew that SPOG was one moment, but like we needed to continue to stand in solidarity with the movement to defund SPD, to decarcerate our prisons, just some of the work that we're trying to do right now, to support each other as we faced austerity measures in our workplaces. I mean, as many of you articulated, right? Like, the police, the only public institution in the neoliberal era to not get funding cuts, right? Like, meanwhile, like educators like ourselves are being expected to do more with less, right? And it's intensifying in the context of COVID. So we knew that we needed to stand together. But then more than that, we needed to build a truly anti-racist, feminist, anti-capitalist labor movement. And that was only going to happen as a cross-union collective. It's not one single union that's going to do it. It's when rank and file workers across industries and trades come together and fight for that. And really kind of coming from that place of shared struggle and solidarity. And that's kind of the work that we've been trying to do since then. We've continued to meet since that SPOG Out rally. And our latest work that we're doing right now is, when we're talking about solidarity in the context of policing and prisons, our real solidarity, the work that we need to be doing is with our incarcerated siblings and the ways in which their labor is being exploited in the context of mass incarceration. And so we're collaborating with Free Them All Washington in their efforts around the Bishop Lewis site. So Bishop Lewis is a work release site. So work release, for people who might not know, is like when you're about to be released soon, you can kind of go into this. Bishop Lewis is a residence. They like find jobs on their own. It's supposed to be the sort of reintegration program, but they're still under the surveillance of the DOC. There's 49 residents in the Bishop Lewis site, and 35 have tested positive for COVID-19. And this is because of DOC negligence. Just a few of the things that they've done in terms of that. So there were quarantine protocols and infection management strategies that were not immediately activated for the roommate of patient 0. Asymptomatic and symptomatic individuals, including those testing positive, were forced to congregate in the same room without medical isolation. Communal bathrooms were not properly disinfected. And patient 0 was identified on October 12th, but they didn't start testing other residents until October 20th. And this is, I think, the 7th outbreak in a DOC facility of COVID-19. And, the Bishop Lewis residents specifically, they've lost wages because of being quarantined because of this. And without a job, they risk being sent back to prison. And the protocol for prison, when you test positive for COVID-19, is solitary confinement. They're facing retaliation for reporting or whistleblowing. And that's all on top of the health risks of contracting COVID-19, that the virus at the heart of the deadliest pandemic of this century. And so some of their demands are to release the Bishop Lewis residents, release them to their homes and support their quarantine needs, to compensate them for their lost wages, suspension of rental payments, and transparency and communication to their families. This is a labor issue. The residents of Bishop Lewis are workers whose exploitation has come at the expense of their health. And we need a labor movement that stands in solidarity with them, not with the cops who help incarcerate them or the COs/overseers who, help facilitate their exploitation. So what Labor for Black Lives is doing is Free Them All wrote a letter to Governor Inslee. We're trying to get as many individual unions as we can to sign on. So maybe, Solomon and Coral, I'll send you the link to that letter and the link so that y'all can kind of reach out to your individual unions. And we're drafting a joint resolution together to get the Labor Council to sign on to this letter and to take this on as a labor issue. Because again, when we're talking about who are workers, I think, Halima, you put it so eloquently, cops aren't workers, right? These aren't the people that we should be protecting. These aren't the people who should have access to our collective bargaining power. It should be the people who they exploit, right? And so we need to be in solidarity with incarcerated people, not with the people who exploit them. And then, also too, this needs to be a cross-union effort. I think that's what SPOG has really taught us. If we're going to live in a world without police, and if labor is going to play a role in that, it's not going to be any one single union. It's going to be when all of us, rank and file, specifically come together and push for that. So I'm excited to be sharing this space with you all and hopefully kind of continuing this this dialogue and this work with you all after this too. So thank you. And I guess, Bo, I think last but not least, pass on to you.
Thank you, everyone. I feel caught up now. I'm really happy to be in this space, this virtual space, because what this virtual space tells me is that I'm not alone, that there's plenty of us spread out across this country, all doing this work, because it needs to be done. And so I just want to share a little bit more of a methods talk to how the SPOG vote was accomplished. Anna did a really great job giving like the 10,000 foot sort of view, and I'm gonna give you the microscope view, which is speaking as someone who's involved in the sausage making of labor in e-boards and so forth. Law enforcement are the right wing of the labor movement at the moment, meaning they don't have the density of votes within, say, any given labor hall, but they have the loudest voice and vote, and they often hold even the most milquetoast progressive resolutions and policies hostage. And by holding things hostage, I literally mean holding things hostage. I've been in e-board meetings where I've seen law enforcement officers who are delegates spend 45 minutes holding up the process, deciding on what color fucking paper we're supposed to use. So it's getting them out of our movement would even behoove our centrist progressive labor heads that we could at least get business done. And so because of their reactionary nature, the methods that were taken to lead up to the SPOG vote was basically to put the onus on them to be an appropriate institution. And what I mean by that is the MLK Labor Council has over 200 or maybe 250 affiliates, locals around the county. I cannot remember which local educators it were. I don't remember if it was SEA or if it was AFT members that in I believe it was April or HiCor. Thank you, Anna. Educators from Highline Community College, correct? Yeah, Anna's nodding yes. No? Well, anyways, I'm gonna go forward with bad information. So anyways, they wrote a letter and submitted it to the MLK Labor Council, basically saying that if you're going to be an affiliate of the Labor Council, you have to commit to being an anti-racist and anti-oppressive institution. For most of the other affiliates that are part of the MLK Labor Council, who are bakers and teachers and so forth, that's a non-issue. The one local or the one affiliate that had problems with it, lo and behold, was SPOG. So through the month of May, the tactic that was being put forth was not, we're going to kick your ass out. The tactic that was put forth was, hey, we're going to demand a really high standard for everyone who's a part of this association. And by virtue of their reactionary nature, they said, fuck you, we're not going to hold that standard, which made going into the June resolution to vote on their standing within the chapter a lot easier, because it really illustrated to the other 249 affiliates that we can't even trust these people to do the bare minimum, not even in practice, but in writing. They couldn't even commit in writing to being anti-racist, which, as we all know, rhetoric that lives on paper isn't the same as practice that lives in the real life, but yet that was still a hurdle for them. So when we did the June vote, another thing that led up to that was we have a lot of delegates to the MLK Labor Council who honestly have a lot of bad blood with each other. I'm just going to be real. We had a whole city full of labor activists that got 20-something years of bad blood with each other that hardly ever worked together on anything. It's a little embarrassing. And so up until this vote, Anna mentioned that there was a rally at the CHOP. Just to rewind the tape a little bit, there was actually two separate rallies. They were planned on two separate parts of the city by more or less two contingencies of organizers who had bad blood with each other. And so I basically reached out to individuals within all these different networks, and I basically just explained to people that it was really time to put our bullshit aside for Black lives. Like, it's embarrassing that we're in this moment where labor needs to be in solidarity for Black lives, yet labor is still being, labor organizers are still being handcuffed to like past grievances, past transgressions, which in a world of COVID really don't matter anymore, to be honest. And so the effort in getting people to just grow the fuck up was successful in getting them all on this Signal thread. So I'm talking like 100 different people on the Signal thread. It was a little unwieldy, and there's definitely some shots fired, but it was also shots fired moving in a forward direction. that basically coordinated the separate rallies to now be one jumbo rally at the CHOP. And so the rally at the CHOP was actually on the same night and time as the resolution vote. That was planned specifically because in a non-COVID year, the resolution would have been in person at the Labor Hall, and we could have just had the rally around the Labor Hall. But because it's a COVID year, the resolution was done over Zoom. So it was actually Comrade Whitney Khan's idea is, well, why don't we just Zoom into the, for the delegates, why don't we just Zoom into the meeting from the rally? Genius. That big crowd of folks that came to show support, you know, were there in the background and foreground. So when I zoomed into, and I wasn't alone, when myself and some other folks zoomed into the call, we had the crowd in the background with, you know, Black Lives Matter signs and like no cops and labor signs and et cetera, illustrating to everyone else on the call that there was public pressure, that we were not having a closed door, closed Zoom meeting. It was very public, and there was eyes and ears paying attention to what the outcome was. And so the vote passed, but one thing that's really important that really needs to be stressed is a lot of the delegates who voted yes were staunch defenders of the SPA contract 2 years ago. So has their political compass shifted, or did they just see which way the wind was blowing and knew how to save their ass? A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, I'll take the win. The point is when public sentiment reaches a peak, that's how we get leadership to capitulate. It was the perfect confluence of many, many factors. Had we not had CHOP, had we not had all those groups merge together, had we not had High Corps start the ball rolling with the methods of just asking for a higher standard, had all those things not happened in those sequence of things, it would have been a much tougher vote. And in fact, most of us, I think, that night didn't actually think we were going to win. We all thought we were just going to have a structure test and at least know where the line is drawn in a room. So getting the win was actually was something worth cheering for. But at the end of the day, the Labor Council itself really is only a rubber stamping mill for Democratic hopefuls. So it's a symbolic victory, but it's these symbolic victories that pave the way to material victories.
Awesome. I feel like I learned, I know a lot of other people probably feel this way, but I feel like hearing from all of you, I've already learned so much about the different tactics and issues and challenges separately you've all come up against, and it gives me a lot of hope to see how you've responded to those things. And we pretty much nailed it on the timing for hearing all 5 speakers. There was another person who wanted to come today, Kat Brooks, but couldn't make it. And they sent this addendum, said this message to share with everybody in their absence. We want to emphasize the importance of care and self-care in this work. Kat Brooks couldn't make it today because she isn't feeling well. We feel so grateful that she accepted our offer to join this panel in the first place, and we were able to add Halimat Alawode. I'm sorry. I wish I could say your name correctly. From No Cop Unions. Care is so critically important to sustaining this movement, and we wish Kat rest and care. And we know we'll see her out in the streets soon. Yeah, does anyone want to have some final comments to wrap up this sort of speaker, when everyone's sort of speaking a little bit about their separate things before we move on to some questions?
I do, because I always have something more to say. So I wanted to quick highlight strategy again, because so many great things were stated. And so I just want to, I'm really, just for the audience and for myself, go over what everyone else said. Asmara, the single strike, like that was great strategy, withholding your labor and saying like, I'm not dealing with these violence workers. That's such great strategy. Julia, the idea that if we have a member of our community harmed by police and we all say, we're withholding our labor, we're not doing it. I live, like, how many times have we seen, especially members of our homeless population, be gunned down by police in public, like shopping centers, like in public, like just gathering places? What if all the workers in the subway and the McDonald's and the care, like all around, so we're not coming to work today, you know, the whole plaza, we're done, because we're sick of cops shooting people in our plaza. That's legitimate strategy that I promise will make people turn heads and listen a little bit more. I think and Anna, the work that was done with the Seattle, like that was amazing. The idea that we can get police officers to tell on themselves is so true. It does not take much for a fascist to let you know they're a fascist. They are happy to announce it. And all it really takes, and I think that we can recreate this across the country, is just raise your standards on your local union board, on your local, just raise the standards at your local level. If you're part of our local, commit to being anti-racist. Ooh, commit to your workers not killing people. That's a standard that almost every other local could probably hit that your police local can't. And look how quickly they will fight tooth and nail to say, I don't want to do that. I don't think I should have any racial bias. And like, they'll tell on themselves. And then you will find, have they ever sat with us as laborers? Have they ever been at the table on our side? And I want to emphasize that the answer to that question is no, they never are here with us as laborers. This is COVID. We're walking into evictions, like Julia said. Sheriff's officers are going to be handing out those eviction notices, or be at your door. A lot of us, a lot of our members are about to be evicted by police officers. I want us to really think about where we are in this fight, and I want labor to be strategic about what we're looking going forward in the next couple of years and where labor wants to stand. Do you want to be for the workers, or do you want to be a capitalist puppet? Pick a side. Pick a side, because you cannot tell me that you're on the side of the workers 2021 going forward, and you're fighting tooth and nail in a pandemic to have police officers be in the unions and act like we're the ones tearing the unions apart. No. The focus going forward, if we want some progress, we want to be able to protect people from evictions, we want to protect our workers going forward. Part of that protection is getting rid of police officers in our union. Solidifying labor is actually solidifying actual labor. And that means getting rid of people who are not labor in our union. And so I just want to highlight the strategies that everyone stated were so awesome. Like, we're so awesome, and we could really come together regionally to do these things together. We can really come together to actually replicate some of these strategies where we are. We've seen it, like, people have been looking down the South. We see what the South does. The South has organizers. The South makes moves. And so I think that we really need to look forward and look to each other, and it has to be across unions. And that's it. Sorry.
Excellent. Yeah.
Love that so much. I just have to say that I love that so much. I'm with all of those. Let's do this. Let's do this.
And on that note, I want to invite all the panelists and all the people watching out there to join our Labor Against Cops Slack group, and we can all keep in touch with each other and share links and petitions and future events like this. And yeah, let's all keep in touch. That includes the viewers and the panelists, and let's grow this movement. You know, it's like everybody said before me, it's not just about one union or everybody working separately. We're not going to get anywhere with that.
And just to piggyback on what was said about communication and how we can learn from each other, I think also another strategy is moving towards signal. If we really want protection in how we communicate and share information, that is the one source that keeps us safe when we're in action. So just from so much commentary from community and public safety on how to stay safe and connected and move in solidarity with communication that doesn't put some of us at risk, just moving forward maybe from WhatsApp and Slack and all these different other forums into Signal. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for the comments. I think we're gonna move into like the question and answer sort of portion. And there's some hand signals that I really like to use. Same like, like Halima said earlier, to, raise your hand if you want to speak. Also, clarifying question, if you have a quick comment or question to clarify something that somebody said, a direct response. And I do up twinkles when I disagree or when I really like something somebody said. So you've probably seen me do that. Yeah, Solomon, is there a question in the chat that we can move towards, or should we use one of the prepared questions?
Let's start off with the prepared questions. Nobody's asked anything yet in the chat.
Okay. Yeah. One of the questions that we came up with, sort of preparing for this forum, is how do you think we will sustain this movement? Like what is keeping it going? How can we make sure that the momentum is sustained? Does anyone have any thoughts on how we can keep the pressure on and keep moving until we are free of cops in our unions? Check.
I think also the piece about unions, I as a midwife within my work, I don't have a union to belong to. So just want to be frank about that piece. And so where my solidarity has been, where I've been able to show most solidarity is just in community spaces. So those who aren't protected. And I really appreciate the comments made earlier about showing solidarity with the most marginalized. And so the more that we move towards understanding that it's not only a struggle when we're impacted by it, but we have to understand how others are impacted that don't have resources near to the degree that we do. And how do we show up consistently, not as a sprint, but a continuous work of our lifetime that we only owe to our ancestors who fought so hard and bravely, stood in solidarity with each other and utilizing the tools that they had to pass the torch to us. It's only right that we continue to stay awake and reach out to each other and show up when we can, take breaks when we can, but nonetheless, understanding the interconnectedness of all of this versus dividing into just the respective places where we benefit from.
Thank you. I just want to add to that. The question was posed: how to keep this going, how to manifest a continuity of this work. I think in the immediacy, the next year or two, we're going to be looking down the barrel of major austerities, and so I think now is the time to really talk about dollars and cents with these police budgets. You know, you might not be able to ever convince anyone of total abolishment of the police, right? But even the most hard-pressed people, you can just get into dollars and cents and just start some really just basic questions like why does like the NYPD have a police budget that's bigger than the Russian military? The entire country of Russia has a smaller military budget than the NYPD. And that's just one example. Do we need these over bloated budgets for tanks and drones and all kinds of other shit, especially when nurses don't have PPE? So just bringing the conversation down to earth. This is how much this costs. This is how much this costs. We only have so much revenue flow. Where should it be prioritized? I think that is one leg into the opposition who, for epistemological reasons, cannot divorce themselves from police. Just getting into the dollars and cents.
Yeah, I'm so like, let's talk money. Like, I'm so ready for us to start talking money. A lot of people, when they say that we need to protect police officers in our unions, it's because they're dudes, right? Police officers are consistent. They're the one workers who somehow don't get they don't hit that, they don't get shot up when it happens with cutting budgets, cutting collective bargaining. They are consistently able to put in their dues, and yet they are consistently requiring that every union they are part of do not use dues for organizing, consistently saying that none of those dues can do anything for anyone else. And so let's talk about the numbers. Let's talk about how we're so afraid of there's just this fear of if we lose the cops, our unions are gonna fall apart. No, they're not. I promise you they won't. Losing the cops is not gonna be that's gonna break our unions. Fighting to the nail to keep the cops in our unions might be the thing though. In the upcoming years, as Bo said, every public sector budget is gonna be on the table. Every single one, from teachers to child care, every single one. But guess which one probably won't? Guess which budget seems to make it after every single government cut? At the very minimum, if you walk away from this conversation, you should be asking, you know what? I think the police budget should be on the table. I think that the billions in the NYPD budget should be on the table. And we start talking about cutting things so we can afford things. I think they should be on the table. Police budgets can be on the table. And I think that we can start asking about, are they actually what we need in labor? I think both suggested it. They are not our base. They are right-wing fringe in labor. They are not our base. And they do not get to speak as if they're the labor base. They are not. I'm so sorry. You're an unwelcome guest in labor. And so right now, I think when it comes to the nitty-gritty of what's coming forward, we know they're going to start cutting things. We know that, we see the cabinet picks in the new administration. There's not going to be an administration that's going to be very friendly to labor. It's just not. And so who do we want in our rank and file when it comes to fight? When push comes to shove, who do we want? Whose money do we want? Who's going to be with us? And so I want to just put that out there as well.
Yeah, I'll kind of add to that too. Thank you for that, Halima. Yeah, I think one thing that's also really important when we're talking about kind of how to maintain this momentum, I think just one thing that one of those things I knew, but kind of got solidified for me, just validated for me even more this upcoming year, is the importance of real direct action that's led by the rank and file, and that's cross-union. That's how we're going to make the changes that we want to see here. The knowledge production that I think you all kind of outlined, Bo and Halima, are really important. Our organizing and our coming together across unions is how we get that across. AFT 1789, we worked with it was really kind of a small group of us within our union that have started coming together in the context of the pandemic as austerity was coming down on us, right? We're already, our classified staff is experiencing 50 layoffs this year in the context of the pandemic. We're just getting hit left and right while our chancellor makes more than the governor, right? But we've always known these things, but when we started coming together as rank and file, we didn't hold, or not all of us held, any real kind of specific leadership position in our union. We've been able to make more change and push more just in a few months than our union had been able to do in the past couple of years. And that's because we were coordinated, we were collective, we made all of our decisions together, we were consistent in our messaging. And when it came to SPOG out and the other work that we've done in the community, it was always across union, right? It wasn't just any one kind of individual union doing their thing. It was all of us kind of recognizing those links that you all made and really kind of coming from that place. And so I think when we're talking about building that momentum, the only way we're going to do that is when we're coming across unions and when we're working together.
Yeah, I agree. I think that everything that people have said is vital. And now to me seems like also a time for us prepare for these fights, prepare as rank and file workers. A lot of the heads, they make enough money. They're not worried about getting evicted. They're not worried about losing their jobs. They're going to be fine. So we need to organize the rank and file workers to fight back and to also fight against, as folks were talking about the austerity and cutting especially public sector workers, it really made me realize how Obama's statement against defund the police was really a very intentional and targeted attack. Because when talking about defunding the police has exposed the budgets of these police. In Los Angeles City, the police get 56% of the entire city budget. 56%. And it's not a surprise that we have some of the most billionaires in the country live in Los Angeles City, and we have the highest amount of people who are homeless in Los Angeles. And it's because they need a well-paid, bloated police force to be able to enforce 660,000 homeless people that live in Los Angeles County and protect the 40 or 50 billionaires that live in the same proximity. They have to protect those people who have billions of dollars from people who are sleeping on the streets and who are victims of police. And police have to be violent. That is part of their job. It has nothing to do with training, has nothing to do with any of that. To maintain that kind of inequality, the police have to be violent, and they have to be racist, and they have to attack workers. So I think that his saying that was meant to do that, and I'm so glad that people kind of saw, because people were in the streets, these last months, that no, not only do we not need to change our messaging of defunding the police, we actually need to be talking about a world where there are no police. And we need to be talking about protecting workers, protecting people who are actually helping to save lives. And I just want to do a little plug. I have a friend, a comrade, his name is Cliff Wilmig, and he's a nurse, and he was recently fired for demanding more PPE at his hospital. I'll put it, excuse me, in the comments. They're calling for bring back Cliff. The insurance companies targeted him. The administration of the hospital targeted him. Why? Because he was asking for PPE. And the question isn't even whether they have the money. Of course they have the money to provide PPE. They have tons and tons of millions of dollars. But if you use your power, then they attack you. And this is also why we, as folks who are part of the labor movement, who are part of organized labor, really need to start to step up more of our game in terms of defending our coworkers, defending workers, and defending folks at our workplaces. Because the tax that they do on one person here or one person there or one local here or whatever, that's just them kind of feeling it out to see what they can get away with. So we really also need to just be speaking out against all forms of the harassment, all the forms of targeting folks, targeting people like Asmara, who stood up against the police at her workplace, and really protecting and defending them, defending you. Asmara, you should have a union. SEIU should organize. Or whatever union should be organizing you and every other worker like you in every other workplace. So that really should be, these also things need to be happening. So it sounds like this is old school stuff, but it's kind of like current school vibes, because we need to do what the folks did in the 1950s, 30s, 60s, and then even more, so I just wanted to also say that.
Awesome. Does anyone else have any comments on sort of this general topic we've been asking about?
I'll add one last thing. Another thing that's really, really important is remember to keep receipts of the rhetoric that labor leaders espouse. My very first AFSCME convention, President Lee Saunders gave this is in 2019, 2018, gave a rabble-rousing speech on the podium, pounding his fist on the podium. This is around the time it was post Janice having its most direct effect on us on AFSCME. He was saying at a convention to 500 delegates or so that if we have to break the law, then we break the law. we as in labor, he was saying, if we got to go back to the 30s, then we go back to the 30s because we're going to do what we're going to do. Now, whether or not he actually truly believes in that rhetoric, and I have my opinions on how much he actually does, that's irrelevant. The fact is he said it. And because it's said, that's a standard that we can hold both ourselves and him too. And so, again, keep the receipts. Raise the standards, meet the standards, demand the impossible, because the impossibilities is what's going to break them.
Thank you. So a question from the chat says, does anyone have a schematic or some kind of graphic illustrating how much money these departments, police departments and correctional officer departments or unions get, and how it could be cut unnecessarily, or sorry, how it could be cut, yes, which sort of brings up like that specific question. And then also generally, like, what kind of research, what kind of data, what kind of, verb, like what kind of, sorry, Bo, what you were saying, like to snapshot the language, and what can we save to use as research to pressure our unions, and what kind of data do we need to make this a successful campaign across all of the unions? Check.
I can try to take I'm kind of looking at the questions in the chat here, and yeah, there's kind of a few around union language or contract language. And so, I think part of it is, this came up a lot with the Defund SPD work. I know like Decriminalize Seattle and King County Equity Now Coalition, we're trying to push for like hiring freezes and things like that, like knowing that a lot of police officers were about to retire. So like trying to push the city council for like hiring freezes and things like that. And one thing that a lot of city council members kind of kept falling back on was like, well, the contract, Spog's contract, just really kind of ties our hands. We can't do it. But when you start looking into the language of the contract, it turned out that a lot of it was very vague. I mean, I don't know, maybe because they never get cuts, like they didn't, they weren't anticipating actually having to lay people off. I don't know. But there was actually, when you actually went into their contract, there was actually a lot of language that would have made a lot of what the demands were very possible. Like it didn't offer the protections that the city council was claiming. And so I think that might be kind of part of it, is looking into the contracts themselves. There's often kind of loopholes and stuff in there that you can kind of leverage with other unions. I think hopefully that's getting at the person's question. I'm not entirely sure.
To piggyback off that, as far as looking for graphs, you can actually get like a look at what cities are spending on your police department. A smooth Google search will have that. I did one real quick, and BuzzFeed News actually has some of the major cities and how much they are spending on their police departments. And they also break it down in those cities, what that looks like compared to other departments. And so if you want those kind of graphics, especially with the uptick in protests and solidarity this summer, you'll probably be able to find a lot more information on police on budgets in your local city than maybe available like a year ago. On top of that, as we're discussing contracts, I just want to say, you're right, like a lot of them do hide behind their contracts, and a lot of their contracts are pretty solid, but not a lot of us actually get to see them. And I think that there's something to be said about how little we actually get to, like, I would love to see the contract in my local city. And I think there's been efforts to be made so we don't get to see the nitty gritty of some of their contracts. And so I think that we should be asking questions what their contracts look like. I don't know off the top of my head, especially like things change, but I know one of the questions was, have we ever been able to reject a union contract by a police officer by a police union? So one thing I will say that's almost guaranteed political suicide. Before the year 2020, that was probably guaranteed political suicide. In the year 2020 and going forward, it might not be. So maybe we should be pressuring some cities to reject some contracts. I think before, yeah, most of your elected officials would be horrified to a police union contract, girl, no. But now we're gonna look closely and we're probably gonna see some more push and shove. I hope us are gonna be asking our elected officials to ask more questions about these contracts. So we're all asking more questions about these contracts going forward. And so I don't know of any examples off the top of my head right now. Maybe we haven't hit those big wins yet, but the future's bright.
Well, and in San Francisco, the most recent hearing with the Board of Supervisors around the POA contracting for the police budget and a lot of other things, there's a lot of false commentary made around what the contracting language did state or didn't state. But most harmful and probably just frankly problematic was the fear, and this was just vocalized by some of the supervisors around the threats the mayor had made if the contract wasn't passed as it stood. So I think there's just so many levels to this beyond just like the sequence and the steps that need to take place. There's a lot of backdoor conversations taking place and a lot of threats that are being utilized as tools as to why people feel that they need to stand in solidarity with the contract so that they can protect the workers. But in reality, that's not protection of the workers. That's exploiting workers in different ways and capacities and utilizing our hard-earned tax dollars to support these fallacies and amplify a fear to get other laborers to support a contract because of their fear. But in reality, that is illegal. Having these threats is not part of what the role that these individuals are elected to do. And so that needs to be named and exposed, and there needs to be transparency around these contracts and negotiations, which has happened behind closed doors. So just for the example of San Francisco this year, there was pressure, a lot of public pressure to reject the contract. And though two of the supervisors did not vote for it, all the other ones did. And two of them mentioned that it was their fear of the threats the mayor had made. So just that needs to be more transparent, and we need to have greater conversations across cities around this.
Thank you. It looks like, is everyone in agreement that we have time for one more question, or because we're hitting it at about that hour and a half mark? Can I get a temperature check on how people are feeling?
Can we for sure address a question that's aimed at Julia's comments around defunding the police? I think that would be a great one to end off on.
Great, I agree. Solomon, will you read that?
All right. Question to Julia's statement on Barack Obama's statement on defunding the police and how being the leader of the most powerful empire makes you a cop. How can international solidarity orgs fighting U.S. imperialism support the labor movement against policing and militarization, and vice versa?
Okay, awesome. So I know for myself, I write for a publication called LeftVoice.org, and we are an international publication. So our crew is in 14 different countries, 7 different languages. And so with that, we also cover other issues. So the debate about whether cops are workers is happening with some of our folks in Brazil and in Argentina. And still some folks, even leftists, are like, cops are workers. We need to make sure, because in some other countries, the police are not paid as well as they are in the United States. And so they say, well, they're poor too, or whatever. But as people may be familiar with, the police are incredibly oppressive in those countries and in other countries. And so, and I'll put it in the comments, an article that was written recently about that debate, about the police, and saying, we don't want the police play that same oppressive role everywhere. In a city called Guernica, in Argentina, which was a land occupation, hundreds of families who have been dispossessed, many of them because of COVID, were living in this land occupation. Many of them indigenous, part of the Mapuche, were living there. You want to guess what the police did? I'll tell you, it wasn't solidarity, okay? They didn't show up with food and support. They showed up with batons and tear gas, and they beat the people up that were living there. This land that wasn't being used for any other purpose besides people having a place to live in this COVID crisis, and they beat them up. In Brazil, the police recently murdered João Pedro, who was 14 years old in the favelas. The police have been incredibly oppressive with the Bolsonaro administration, who was friendly with the Trump administration, and beating people, attacking them, and also orchestrating the assassination of a Black queer woman, Mariela Franco, who was an organizer and a socialist in Brazil, and she was assassinated by the police. And so it's important and so that's one thing that we do. And so I guess, how can we have more international solidarity? Really making links and discussing with folks. I do invite people, if interested. We do interviews with folks who are part of the labor movement about this specific question. And when we do many of those interviews, we will translate them. So people can read them in Spanish, they can read them in French, they can read them in Portuguese, where we have people who are part of the Black Lives Matter movements in those countries. So when we have these debates here, it shouldn't just stay within this place, the United States. And furthermore, internationally, when the police attack, what am I trying to say? When we do stuff here, it reverberates around the world. When we stop US imperialism, it reverberates around the world. So for example, I have a comrade in Bolivia, which is a large amount of indigenous folks. And if you know, recently the coup that happened was just voted out of office. They weren't voted in because it was a coup. And the United States imperialists supported the government, and military supported that coup. And one of our comrades was remarking and said the Black Lives Matter movement stopped US imperialism. And this is how they stopped it. First of all, they inspired the folks who had been fighting against the police to take a stand, to organize, strike, protest, and eventually vote out the coup government. But furthermore, because we engaged in direct action, we fought the police, people burned down precincts, people stood up. There was a strike where they shut down the ports in the West Coast. Because those things happened, the military could not focus its attention in Bolivia because they had to focus their attention in the United States. So what the US would normally do, which is when a group of people rise up in other countries, they show up, they send their death squads over, they murder the leaders, and then they try to dispossess those governments and install their own right-wing coups. They could not do that. They couldn't make moves like that because we were rising up in the United States. It's so important that we realize where we are internationally, that the things that we do don't just stay here, that they have international implications. And so I did see also in the chat that there was someone from an SEIU local in Canada. So we should link up with them. I think their name is Zoe. We should link up with them and really just have these debates, discussions with other folks, try to be as international as we possibly can while the internet is still relatively legal, while we can make the international connections. And I also invite folks to read LeftVoice. If you feel like there's something going on at your workplace that you want to write about, or you want us to interview you about, that you also would like internationally to get attention, please contact me, hit me up, because we want all these debates to not just be within these borders, to not just be within this room. So I just thank you so much. Thank you, Halimat, for pointing that question out, because that's definitely, I wanted to bring in more of the internationalism too. Yeah.
And I just want to add on to that real quick. Some tangible things that we see right now with SARS in Nigeria, where I was born, going on. We see like all the violence in there. We see that police officers, there are violence workers everywhere. And a lot of people in the global south will say that, oh, the strategy should be to increase police budget. That conversation is also happening in Nigeria because like the police budgets are so low and they're poor. And the assumption is, well, if our police officers weren't poor, they wouldn't steal and beat us. Sweetheart, police officers in the United States are one of the most well-paid police officers in the world. And guess what they are still doing? Well-fed and beating us. And so I want us to understand that increasing the individual wealth of your violence workers will not make them more violent. That is not good strategy. I promise you, we've tried it here. Take that lesson for what it is. It's not good strategy. And also as far as international solidarity, some tangible things that our militaries in other nations work heavily with police departments. And so if you do have a global perspective and an anti-imperialist type of framework that you're working from, please try and not get military surplus in your local police department. That's a great thing to question the military budget in general. Is actually a great anti-imperialist move that also affects local police departments because they often buy the surplus of those weapons of war and destruction. And so I think that's important if you want to do that as a tangible way. I know that the Atlanta Police Department was actually receiving training from Israeli police forces. And so people were trying to protest against that and do solidarity between Palestinians and people in Atlanta, and the fact that like our police departments have no business trading ideas on how to kill us. Nope. No trading ideas on how to kill us. And so I think if you should look to see like, yeah, a foreign military might be helping train your local police department, believe it or not. Like, yeah, they do that. And so that is also a really great way to have anti-imperialist solidarity. I mean, the Palestinians came up and they protested on our behalf as well when it came to that training. And so I think that those things do happen and you had to tap in to which communities are already engaged. So I would say the Palestinian community is already really engaged in international solidarity work when it comes to anti-police violence. And so other communities as well may also be engaged in that as things go forward. So I just want to throw those in as some tangible examples of like, yes, people really do both.
Awesome, thank you. I don't want to cut this conversation short. I'm sure I know I'm learning a lot. I'm sure a lot of other people are learning a lot. Do we want to continue this conversation? I have to personally go, and we are over an hour and a half now. Do we want to sign off, or do we want to continue the discussion?
I have a quick finisher, just really fast.
Yeah, let's do finishers. Anybody throw in your last final closing piece?
Yeah, one thing I want to close with is the one thing 2020 COVID really did for labor in the US is it really brought the fight for PPE home to the center of the empire. Fighting for PPE has been a labor battle across the world for decades. In the Philippines, people build construction, like the entire infrastructure of the country is done by workers in flip-flops, no hard hats. And the labor organizers over there who are just fighting for PPE face potentially getting assassinated at church. That's how ruthless it is over there. And so the actual companies that invest in murdering people have installations here in the US. If you work in higher ed, chances are your institution probably takes money from Raytheon, probably takes money from Boeing. There's something you could do about that at your institution. And that's international solidarity. That's how I want to finish.
Thanks, Bo. Anybody else have any last statements to close us out? I want to thank all the panelists so much. This has been such a fantastic forum, and I think I really enjoyed it, learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience is feeling the same way. And I feel really honored that everybody came here and participated and brought so much energy and so much important experience. And now we can go forward. I do want to reiterate, everybody, please join the Labor Against Cops Slack. It's not just if you're in a union, it's for everybody. It's for activists. You know, if you're not a cop, then come on and join the Slack. So I've left a link to that in the chat on the Facebook. And unless anybody has anything else, I will close out the meeting. Thanks again, everyone, and have a nice week.
Thank you.